Welcome to Philly Fortune Talks with your host, Jake Penny, where the city's brightest minds share the secrets behind their success. Are you ready to be inspired?
In this episode, we dive deep with Ben Williams, a tech entrepreneur and industry leader with over 20 years of experience across major corporations like AT&T, Lockheed Martin, and smaller startups like Relio, Exyn Technologies. And as the CEO of Exyn Technologies, Ben is at the forefront of autonomous drone innovation. From his days as a U.S. Navy veteran to being selected for Wharton's 40 Under 40, Ben brings a wealth of experience in product development, business strategy, and leadership. Join us as we explore his journey in technology, innovation, and his passion for tackling unstructured environments. Ben, it's a pleasure to have you on Philly Fortune Talks today.
Very much appreciated for having me on.
So for the audience that doesn't necessarily know you, give a brief journey on where you got started and where you are now.
Sure. Well, I got started pretty close to here, actually. I was a Penn undergrad when I started my first businesses because I ran out of tuition money and I wanted to stay around. And that was sort of a entrepreneurship by necessity, but started a long obsession and some might say problem with starting companies or sticking around the growth stage of early companies. I having started there, and then I went into active duty naval service for about 5 years, and got a really great opportunity there in the sense of got out of business world and very much operational and in the military sort of execution mindset. But then came out and have been at a bunch of different companies, a couple different industries. I seem to sort of shift gears entirely about every 6 years, and so I've been in the energy world, in the defense world, in the marketing automation world, the autonomous robotics world. So been really fun pathway all the way through there. I like to describe it as career ADHD. And the last decade or so, in parallel, I've been doing a lot of coaching and mentoring. Started off doing mentorship for veterans getting out of the military, transitioning into civilian life. And from there, I really liked it and I enjoyed being able to give back that way. And that then sort of bridged into doing a lot of other mentorship for a lot of accelerators, especially throughout the Philadelphia and New York ecosystems and globally. So there's plenty to dig into if we go there.
So, as a visionary business leader, what do you think are some innovations you've brought to the organizations that you've worked with that you're most proud of?
It is interesting. Like, I think the things I'm actually most proud of, ironically, are not that innovative. And I think a lot of it, I like to think of it the way a coach does when you're talking about how a sports team does really well. The best coaches focus on the fundamentals. It's not about the trick shot or the super fancy play. You never get there if you don't do the fundamentals well. And so a lot of it's about building good culture, being clear in your communications, hiring well, building clarity in your strategy. If you can do those things well, then it puts you in a position to be able to get to some of the really fun stuff. And I haven't always done them well. There's plenty of mistakes I've made in my career, but overall, on average, I think I've done fairly well, and that's made all the difference to be able to even have a shot at some of the innovative stuff.
Right. And like having orchestrated like several successful startups, and expansions, what is like your best advice for someone looking to scale a new business venture since you've been, scaling businesses your whole life?
I think my best advice overall, I think, is consistent with whatever type of business, and most of it is that clarity of purpose and communication is paramount. As soon as you have any more than like 2 people at a company, then communication starts to break down incrementally, let alone when you have multiple layers of management or different locations, different types of working styles. All of that leads to the likelihood that you are not being heard or understood correctly or enough. And so, especially as a leader, especially as a CEO or C-level in any form, communication is the top piece. Like there's lots of people that can help you hire a practitioner well to do a specific skill set, or you can hire a contractor to do that. But if you don't clearly articulate what it is you're supposed to be doing, then they could be an amazing engineer and build a great thing that isn't actually what you needed. And so it really comes down to clear communication of needs, requirements, purpose, strategy as a leader, and everything else kind of follows from there. But I guess when you're thinking about an early stage business, especially, the way to get there, I think, is understanding that everything radiates outward from understanding your customer and the customer need. Because once you can really clearly articulate what the problem is from the customer's perspective, what success looks like from the customer's perspective, and how to fit into their existing habits, all of a sudden your marketing is pretty clear. Your sales process is pretty clear. You understand generally what the needs are for the product, and then that extends into what are your options for building it from an engineering perspective. So, it all really revolves around that central thing, and that's true at all stages of business, but it's especially critical early on because you can save yourself years and millions of wasted effort if you get it right a little bit quicker.
Yeah, I totally agree. You have your purpose, you have communication, and the mission too. Making sure everybody's on the same journey and feels a part of it. Because
Yep.
at the same time, like if people don't have, understand the purpose or the mission, they're not going to be performing for you at their highest potential. So it's making sure like that, whatever you want to call it, corporate culture or whatever it
Yeah.
is all jiving together for everybody.
Yeah.
Super important.
Hmm. Absolutely.
Yeah, and then in your career, you focused on, and most likely still focus on sustainable profitability.
Mhm.
What are like some key like financial strategies like that you use to ensure long-term success in various businesses?
Hmm. So the best advice I ever got in terms of thinking about a business, regardless of stage, is the idea of unit economics driving everything else.
Mm.
I When I was at Lockheed, we would have some of these senior mentors that would always joke about, like, we're losing money on a per unit basis right now, but if we get to enough volume, then they go, no, that just means we're losing money at a faster rate at higher volume. Like,
Right.
you can't just say magically at volume things work out. If you have a
Right.
specific plan for how you cost reduce and how you get to that point, fine. But the idea there was, like, figure out how you can be profitable on a per unit basis, either immediately or very quickly. And then you can think about how do you invest for growth, and you can trade off, like, do I lower margin to expand my footprint early? Is it a land grab type of market, or is it a slow burn type of market? Is it a
Mhm.
first winner takes most or winner takes all kind of market? Then you give up on profitability early in order to get the most market share, that sort of thing. But you can't get there if you don't have the unit economics understood, and if you can't envision and articulate what a profitable unit economic structure looks like, because then you can diverge from it. If you don't really understand it, then you're doomed to just lose money in perpetuity, basically.
Yeah, and a lot of companies don't have um, that option, right? They're not these corporations with fat bank accounts and just
Right.
they can have a burn rate for a while to become
Hmm.
that market mover in whatever new territory they're trying to go in.
Right.
For smaller companies, that play doesn't really work for you because you can't be
100%.
losing money and scaling and whatnot because you start scaling, you start losing money, and that just
Yeah.
ruins everything.
Scale the losses.
Yeah, it's pretty much. But how do you balance the need for like resource optimization while still fostering like innovation and like growth in your organizations?
Well, it is hard because it's really easy to be a backseat driver as, like, an advisor. It's
Mm.
it's really easy to be like, well, I don't know if I would do that, but at the end of the day, I will always take the option of learning more about my customer need over an additional paying customer on a one-to-one basis, because I get more value in the long run from better understanding the need than I do from just having a single paying customer. Um, you can sort of play that out over a larger scale, but the general idea is like information is your power early on, and then once you've hit the point where you have a product that is selling itself, basically, people are referring you, and you get you become profitable on a per unit basis, and there's demand for it, sort of pulling you forward. That then becomes the point where you can really focus on like economic growth. But I think it's really hard for an early stage entrepreneur to be able to stick to the guns on like, I need to know and understand this market well enough to solve it successfully and completely, rather than just going, well, there's dollars here, let me just take some dollars. The caveat here is that is sort of a venture model. If you're able to sustain yourself at a burn until you really understand it, that is sort of an inherently venture oriented or self-invested bootstrapped approach. But if you need to be making money from day one, then the approach is slightly different, in which case I think it's a lot about how do you build a self-sustaining services or consulting business while learning enough about that industry to then spin off the product that you really want to build over the long run.
Got it. Yeah.
Makes sense?
Yeah. Going back to like we were just talking about, like people have, the option to do that and some people don't. So it's like
Yep.
testing new territory or a new potential, target avatar. They
Hmm.
burn a little bit where others can't. They have to have it all dialed in before they go in.
Yep. Absolutely.
Yeah, you've had some experience in mergers and acquisitions, but
Hmm.
like, what are some of the most critical factors to consider when, integrating two organizations?
Yeah, I mean, it's a really interesting problem to go through, right? Because almost by definition, they're two different cultures. They are likely, in most cases, I think you end up having different sizes of organizations. It's not super common to have a merger of equals.
Right.
It's usually someone is bigger or more successful than the other, or one is like, a services org, one is a technical product org, or there's a lot of ways that it can be different, and it's pretty unusual to have something that's really, really similar and simpatico. So a lot of it really revolves around how do you create a combined vision, and instead of trying to like force integrate one way or the other, instead you say, look, embrace that we're all coming from somewhat different backgrounds, but here is the vision of the end state. Here's where we are all going. And like, instead of crashing into each other and trying to, shake hands, instead you all turn generally in the same direction. You're running in the same path. And then over time,
Right.
people figure out the ways to work together, and you give your managers, your line managers, the way to sort of pitch that end vision and to figure out how to align those teams, rather than just going, well, you guys have to figure out how to work together, which isn't a super helpful way to do it. And so I think a lot of it really revolves around this, like articulating a clear strategy, and then figuring out what the culture is that you want to build as that end state, and then pulling people along with you. You have to work at it, and inevitably there'll be some attrition there as well. Not everyone is going to want to change along with that, or they won't like the new vision, and that's a thing that you'll have to deal with as a leader as well.
And you mentioned like the corporate culture part, like I feel as if different corporations have different corporate culture as well. So it's like, and now how does that work? How
Mhm.
does that jive?
Yeah. Well, I mean, it is interesting because in a lot of ways, um, a corporate culture, no matter how much thought and design you might put into it, at the end of the day, it mostly reflects how the senior team acts.
Hmm.
Um, if you are a person that values open discussion and decision making. And, once people's input and you run your immediate team like that, that is likely to cascade throughout your organization, almost by definition to some extent. It isn't that you can just ignore it, but you should be aware that that's how you work best and how you want to build the organization. And so you lead by example, and you also show others how to lead by example as that sort of set of criteria gets passed down through the management ranks. What I don't think works is if you have a particular working style and you try and build a culture that is different than that, then it's always not going to jive on the executive team, and it's always going to feel weird, and people aren't going to be able to buy into it cleanly and clearly or honestly. And I think that usually is a pretty big recipe for disaster.
Yeah, yeah. And on the topic of like a little bit of adversity,
Mhm.
can you share an example of how you've helped build a resilient business model in the face of adversity?
I think almost every startup is in the face of adversity, but yeah, I mean, we went through COVID.
Sure.
Everything COVID was weird. When I was at my last startup that I was a founder at, we went through some pretty rapid growth at the very beginning of the influencer marketing cycle, and then it became so popular that almost every week there was a new competitor basically copying our homepage and
Wow.
starting up a new quote unquote Aurelio like competitor. And we would have to go into investor conversations or customer conversations. They'd be like, how are you different than these other 50 companies? I'm like, I don't know who half of these are. I have no idea what they do. And so we just shift from we're doing this where no one else is doing it. And instead we had to shift our culture to be, we are executing well, and we have a successful product, and we are, at the bleeding edge of innovation. We're not just a Me Too, follower that is trying to emulate, someone else. And over time, we learned how to do that, but we hit a wall for a little bit where we were trying to figure out how to shift gears there, and we had to shift the way we sold and the way we executed, the way we talked about the company. And that was a tough cycle for us to go through. And we came out the other side of it okay, but it was tough. It was not something that we expected to see happen. It was almost like we were victims of our own success in the sense that we had gotten out in front and were well enough known that then people are like, oh, great, target on your back, and we probably weren't quite ready for that.
Yeah, I don't think like many people are ready for that to have a target on your back. Like, hey,
Yeah,
let's copy these guys.
yeah.
How have you used system streamlining to improve like operations across the organizations you've led, particularly in, education, for instance?
What do you mean?
So like well, we don't have to use any of your companies. Like everybody has systems and processes.
Hmm.
So what are some of like maybe the systems and processes you use to like
Oh,
improve
I see. Yeah.
operations across your businesses?
Mhm. So, I've tested probably most of the frameworks, most of the management frameworks that are out there. I'm currently loving the use of a particular subset of EOS,
Okay.
the
Yeah.
entrepreneur operating system. I don't use all of it, but I do use the L10 meeting structure, and we use that across almost all of our teams. The executive team does it. Each sub team has like a version of that for their team meetings, and it's all in Asana. So these tasks are like updated weekly or more frequently. And what it ends up doing is when there's enough of those actions documented, people get in the habit of like checking their task list. And so a lot less stuff falls through the cracks. Most of it is captured. And the problem then is more one of prioritization and communication. And so, you'll get people commenting on tasks, say, is this still a top priority? Should I be working on this, or should I tag one of their tasks? And, you can do a little bit of real time, but asynchronous
Mhm.
help prioritizing that way. And it's much easier than trying to do something on chat or like email or something like that. And so it's one of those things where we experimented with the right process, the right tools, and the right culture that matched our team. And so in this particular case, that set of structures ends up working pretty well. And that was a good lesson of like, what I used at Relio didn't quite work the same way here,
Yeah.
partially because the technologies were different, the people, the personalities were different, some of the structure was different. And so it was sort of getting down to basics again and going, okay, the goal is clear communication, prioritization of work tasks, and accountability. And so using those key things to then go and find the right tool sets for the team to use.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I know a lot of people, like I know a few people that use EOS,
Mhm.
but there's so many other like
Yeah,
there the Slack, Asana, Monday, there's a bunch of that stuff out there and everybody, depending on the corporation,
Mhm.
depends on the softwares that they use.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, I think a lot of it is about consistency. Like any of those platforms probably can work if a team is willing to buy into it and use it. You know,
Yeah, for
uh,
sure.
a 50% tool that's used by 80% of the people is way more effective than a 100% tool that's used by 20%. So you want people using it. You want some consistency, and you can deal with some foibles of the platform or the approach.
Absolutely. And you're known for your ability to deliver like compelling presentations. What are some of your top tips for crafting and delivering presentations that inspire and motivate your people?
Well, I think a lot of it is just experience and sort of confidence. I think one of the best tips I ever got when I was starting out at Lockheed was the hardest part is starting. And so, most people that are giving a talk, they probably know a lot of the content. They're probably familiar with it, especially if you're a subject matter expert. Once you get started, the harder thing is probably to get you to stop. Like you
Mm,
can talk probably for a long time. And so, in a lot of ways, it's starting strong such that you are able to hit your stride. And so, I worked with one of my early mentors at Lockheed, and they taught me about like always have just a 1 or 2 sentence lead in that is super generic, but it just starts you off and gets you talking so that you don't get nervous about it. You're just like, I know my intro and it's fine. And then by the time you finish those 2 sentences, then you've started to get in the swing of things. Your juices are running. You're like ready to start talking about whatever the topic is. And I found that to be super, super helpful as, I'm effectively an introvert, but I've had to do so much extroverted work that, you sort of begin to look like one. And a lot of it was because of I would prep a few of these phrases or like starting statements that just get me moving and get over the hump of uh, you know nervousness, basically.
yeah. Yeah, and many business owners are thinking about how to create income outside of their current profession venture, whether that's passive income or
Mhm.
active income to replace the current income that they have through investments or whatever that may be. Do you have any thoughts on how you plan to create that income or how you suggest maybe your opinion, your professional opinion for other people out there in your shoes to secure financial freedom through for yourself, your future family, or anybody that you work with.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a fallacy of like there's a bunch of sort of passive income opportunities that you build a little thing and it generates a huge amount of money and you're off on the beach all day, right? Like there's there's not much of that.
Yeah, no.
If you get really lucky, then maybe.
Yep.
But I think in general, it's getting enough assets that you then can have it work for you. So whether that's real estate or whether that's stocks or whether that's a lower risk thing like CDs or bonds or whatever, like all of that stuff basically is once you have made some money, then the money can work for you. You have enough assets that it can start generating income and becomes a compounding thing, right? Like compound interest or compound returns. And I think the biggest thing is, and there's a bunch of interesting like literature about this too, is like the first 50K or the first 100K you have in savings is the hardest. And then
Yeah.
once you have that, then your sort of daily habits become less impactful to your overall sort of savings profile or whatever. So if you can sort of scrimp and save to get yourself, a couple $100,000 in real estate or stocks or whatever, like that begins to compound over time and it becomes less risky in a sense. But the other piece of it is like, most people are not going to be really great at everything they do. Most people have a few things they can get good at. And so if you're going to be good at building companies, then do that and pay someone to manage your money well. You don't have to also then be a great stock picker and a tax structure specialist. Like there's professionals that do that, and
Yep.
it costs some money, but then you don't have to go and figure it out. And time is the most valuable thing we have as entrepreneurs, and I mean probably as people, but especially early stage company entrepreneurs, like time is money on a geometric scale.
For sure. And just also just focusing on what you're really good at that drives revenue. You don't want to be focusing on, trying to figure out the best tax strategies for you for your instance. Like that's kind of just a waste of time where your dollar goes way, your time goes way farther focusing on what you're great at so that you can pay that person to be able to, take care of all that stuff. But
Yep.
Ben, it was a pleasure to have you on Philly Fortune Talks today. For people that want to learn more about you, follow you, whatnot, where's the best place for them to get a hold of you and see what you got going on?
Yeah, I mean, I'm somewhat active on LinkedIn. That's probably where the easiest place to find me. Go to the website for Exyn as well, exyn.com. We got a lot of great stuff going on, and we're all over the social media structures as well. So come find us there, send us a message or post.
Awesome, Ben. It was a pleasure.
Excellent. Thanks a lot.
Thanks for tuning in to Philly Fortune Talks with Jake Penny. Inspired to share your success story? Visit phillyfortunetalks.com/guest and let's inspire together.